Mouse1 here. In this video I'll be doing something which I haven't done in absolutely ages, and I'll be making a paper clay model. This is a birthday present for my friend, and he loves the game Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, so I decided to make Link from that game. Unlike my usual creations, I am going bigger with this one, like way bigger than I usually do, just because I wanted to do something different and see how sculpting at a larger scale feels compared to sculpting at a smaller scale. I'm using my usual concoction of flour, water, salt and paper as my clay. Just makes a really nice air dry clay that is super cheap to make. You can do it completely with household supplies, and it becomes super hard and just nice once it dries. So yeah, I use that. I sculpt out the face, trying to work on the forms. I start with it just being flat on the table, just so I could really get to see what I was doing and make sure I got all the details in without smashing everything by picking it up all the time. I sculpt out his little elf ears. To speed up drying, I often use a little desk fan just to get the air circulating, and it just helps to dry it out a bit quicker. I try and add some volume to the face, like forwards wise, to like build up that profile. It's something that I've always struggled with quite a bit, but working at a bigger scale is so much more obvious than it is on smaller pieces. So I did try and like get some depth into the facial structures, really building everything up, building up the chin, the forehead, the ridge of the eyebrows, all of that, the cheekbones, and I added more and more details of tiny little like noodles of clay, try to add in those eyebrows, which kind of get lost in the final piece, but it's nice to know they're there, and it helps with like expression, and just adding in those tiny details early on can help it become alive slightly quicker and make it, because like if you miss like a tiny detail on the face, your brain would know that something's off but won't know what it is. So just adding on those details, even if you won't be able to see them in the final piece, is super important. I add more detail to the ears, try and actually make them look like ears and not just like teardrop shaped pieces. And I use this felting awl to blend pieces together. You don't need any fancy tools though. Like I've made entire models literally just using an unbent paper clip as the only tool. That and my hands. My hands are like my best friend when it comes to like blending or doing anything. We'll say you have to be willing to get a bit messy when it comes to paper clay. But it comes out so nice and so easy that I think it is worth the payoff. I then start adding more like 3 dimensions to it, so I build out the head, start assembling everything, and build down the neck, blending that into the back of the skull. And I just use my awl to like really define that line that's there. And I then start blending it into the shoulder area of the sculpture, and just keep blending it with the felting awl, and just try and build everything up to be nice, going all the way down into the chest, doing the collarbone and all that, just try to get some of the anatomical structures there. I don't claim to be a master of anatomy, I was just kind of using some reference images off the internet to try and get things looking right. And also, in the game, Link is a very simplified version of a person, because like obviously performance, you can't have millions of polygons on your character which is constantly being processed at runtime. So it is a very simplified version of a person. So I did kind of have to figure out what things would look like if he wasn't just a video game character. For the base, because I think that a good base can really make or break a piece, I decided to go for a Sheikah slate design. Well, like something at least looks reminiscent of a Sheikah slate, and the reason I'm doing this now is just because paper clay takes a while to dry, and it felt like a waste of time just to be sitting there watching it, so I decided to go on with the base. And I just tried to replicate the design of a Sheikah slate as best as I could. So I carved out all the pieces and assembled it, adding layers to try and get all those details in place. I probably put in more effort into this than I needed to, because like obviously Link is going to be covering a large portion of this, but I know it's there, and I wasn't sure exactly how he was going to be positioned, so I decided I should just make the entire thing and see what it looked like after that. And then if anything was covered, like it didn't really make a difference to me that I had to probably put in a bit more work than you'll actually see in the end product. I think it's worth it at the end of the day. And to hide all those ugly holes in the cardboard, I just use strips of paper and just bend them around the edges to just kind of blend those in. I cut out this corner to try to get all those details right for the Sheikah slate, blending it in with more paper and all of that. I use tissues in places where like the paper wouldn't bend right, so corner pieces, anything with like finer details, I just use paper so I can do it without losing too much of that detail work, but also covering up all the ugly little holes in the cardboard. And I just go through with my awl to like keep punching out those details, making sure they aren't lost with the blending process. And all the glue I'm using is literally just like a standard issue PVA glue, and I curl these tissue pieces around the edge to try and get those 3D elements to the handle, and I just build up that in a way that I think looks nice. And I try to replicate this as closely as possible to the actual design of the Sheikah slate. And I do the little eyeball piece that goes in the middle. I'll admit my knowledge of Zelda is very limited, so I'm not entirely sure what this symbol is, but it is just a symbol that is on the Sheikah slate, so I decided I'd try and replicate that using a nice thin bit of cardboard, just sticking that in place, trying to get everything where I want it to be, adjusting things here and there to try and get things like proportionally correct. I had these little triangles in and these little like strips that go around the edges that kind of like glow on the Sheikah slate, and they have these like circles of like energy almost. I don't know what they are, but they look cool, so I added them on. And I blend everything in with paper just to try to hide any gaps in the cardboard. Going back to Link now, I pull away some of the bottom of the arms just because I didn't want to add anything more. He already looked way more bulky than Link is, so I decided I'd make the base of the arms by taking away instead of adding. And I create these like layers of paper to create a nice like seam for the shirt, and then I blend on the tunic that he's wearing out of paper clay just because I want that to be a bit thicker. And I use my awl to try and keep everything looking detailed. I had some like paper clay like threads across the front. I end up replacing these later on with like better ones, but it did feel nice to have just that bit of detail on there for the time being. And yeah, I go all the way around with the collar, and I also hem off these sleeves of paper just to get a nice straight seam on that. I added little earrings in, and then I just keep adding more details, add like little wrinkles into his shirt, and the strap that holds his sword, which I use this like rubber shaper, which again, you don't need stuff like this to make a decent sculpture, but I have it, so I may as well use it, right? And I use that to add on the details. I add more detail to the straps, like clasps and things. A lot of this I also replace later on because it kind of gets smashed as I'm working on it. And because the back was looking way too plain, I decided to make a master sword. I'm going to say ahead of time this master sword is way too big for Link, but I think it looks cool, so I'm going to go with it. The handle I create by using a straightened out paper clip as a guide and then just wrapping paper around that. And then I use paper clay for the actual details and like the grip and the top. Gluing all of that into place as so. Blending in everything and all that with like tissue and glue as I did with everything else. I create the little wings of the sword and I add some details onto those with thinner card, and then I create like the rest of the sword and just stick everything together. It took a couple attempts to get that right, but I think it did come out alright in the end. And I add some wrappings to the handle, which is just some yarn, which I just wrap around in both directions to create this like crisscross pattern on the handle. I add some details to the, not really sure what that part of the sword is called, my knowledge of swords is minimal. This is where I replaced all of the detailing with like cardboard and thread versions, just because they hold their shape better and I think they look just a bit more accurate and precise. I then start assembling things, like putting them on the base, adding the sword. I add the actual like sword part of the sword. It's in like a sheath, and I add some details to that, blending everything in, try and make everything nice and seamless. And I think it looks pretty good. It definitely just adds some visual interest to the back of the sculpt, And finally I can get onto the hair. I like doing this last just because a lot of the time if a character has longer hair, it's going to fall down over the rest of the sculpt, and you want it to look organic, so you want that to be the last thing you sculpt so you can like mold it to the rest of the design nice and easily. And I just keep going around trying to mimic the character's hair design as best as I can, using my alt to just blend everything in, create nice detailing, and just create little like flyaways and just adding as much detail as I can. I actually really enjoy sculpting hair. I think it comes out super cool in the end, and yeah, I think it's really nice. So just going over everything, going all the way around the back, trying to like add like flow to the hair, so like it all comes from a center seam and then at the back it pulls into the ponytail, like all the little threads all go towards the ponytail, and I add a little like hair tie to it. Then I just like use Mod Podge to blend the sculpture in with the base, try and fill in the gap that's between the two. And we can finally get onto the painting. I start with using some gesso to get down a really nice just white base coat. I know a lot of it is light colours already, but the base coat just helps the paint to stick better, and anything which isn't white, like the threads, the base, all of that, it is so much easier if you just do a nice white base coat, especially if I use really rubbish like poster paint to paint it. If you're using a nice quality paint, you probably don't need to do this, but the really cheap like primary school grade paints that I'm using definitely need a base coat to work effect in like any sort of timely manner. Like if you did 100 coats, then yeah, it's gonna be fine, but like a lot of them are just really transparent. I start with doing like base coats in colour now. Yeah, the colours are often a little bit off, like Link isn't Simpson yellow, but really at this point I just need to get a rough colour down so I can start adding in more details down the line. So yeah, some of the colours aren't exactly accurate, but I just need something down that I can build off of. So I do like the blue shirt, the brown hair and straps, the brown base, all of that. I just go over it with a nice base coat, trying to like keep colours consistent where I can, so like the colour of his hair is also on the base and stuff like that. And I just try and just add in some like details and stuff, like shirt colour, which is the same as the sleeves colour, all of that, just going over everything, doing layer upon layer. I go onto the sword to do a nice like bright colour, which I also bring onto the handle of the base, doing more coats on everything. I do the purple for the handle. This purple was so transparent, it drove me insane. And then the white is the worst one when it comes to transparency. It took so many coats to get onto the eyes, and I think at some point I genuinely just gave up and switched to a nice acrylic. Bringing on some of the details. It's a bit messy what I'm doing, but after you do washes and the dry brushes, you won't be able to see any of this mess. I just want to get something down. I do the eyes and stuff, adding in the pupils, using these like teeny tiny brushes. I add the pattern onto the shirt that he's wearing, which is just orange and green like lines and dots. Add some highlights to the eyes and the lines around the edge of his tunic. At this point I had switched to an acrylic paint just because I could not imagine doing this with that white poster paint, which is more water than paint, I think. And I darken some of the brown just to try and add some variation. Now I'm going on to the part which really brings it to life. I'm doing some washes. On the hair I start with a really dark wash and then just progressively bring it lighter and more like orangey, just to try and get that like depth that I'm after. So yeah, it looks really dark at first, but after a few more coats of the dry brush it does look way better. And I do the same wash on the base to try and like age it, and I think that looks really nice. I do a wash on the skin to try and bring out some of the like structures that I've got going in there. I use a blue wash on the tunic just to try and make it look like he's been wearing it for a while. And I start doing dry brushes on the hair to really bring out the highlights and bring back some of the colour that's been lost, and I think it looks really good. And I add some like weathering to the base. Then I give everything a glaze of a watered down Mod Podge. The only reason I'm watering it down is because it's really old and I was having some trouble getting it to dry clear on some of my other works. So I've just been watering it down very slightly to try and retain the clearness that it's supposed to have. It's just been sat for like probably years. I've probably had that, and it's like you can tell like it's streaky and horrible. Some things I did with a gloss Mod Podge instead, and I paint the base black, and with that I've finished. I think it looks really cool. I'm super happy with it, And apart from that, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe if you did, and let me know that this is something you want to see more of. And apart from that, I will see you next week with another video. Bye!